give a nice roaring welcome to our state treasurer, John Schroeder.
Bad thing about these masks, you can't see when somebody's smiling. Well, really, I've already told my wife and my kids, you can have everything. I'll just take them grandkids and move on. And for those that haven't had them yet, it's unbelievable, because you truly can just go in, cause havoc, and then you're out. And I'm really, really good at that grandparenting stuff. I was telling Lisa earlier, though, we just had our third. I don't want to take my whole time talking about my grandkids, but we just had our third, and I had to sit my son down and explain to him that he's not a rabbit. He's had 3 now in 4 years, and there are consequences to that. But he said, Dad, only have a 4-bedroom. Wait, 1, 2. He only got a 4-bedroom, so they all got their own bedroom. So we'll see what happens. But it is nice to be here. It's nice to see so many people, and I say this sincerely. As Lisa said, I'm a Army veteran. I served in the 101st Airborne Division. I'm a former narcotics agent, and God took me on a whole different path when I was about 29. My retina hemorrhage, and some of y'all may have heard this, but there's a lot of people here I don't think I know, but. It's just amazing the path, and it hadn't turned out so bad. This state treasurer gig isn't a bad thing, and but I've had 2 totally different careers. But I tell people I did not grow up in a political family. At some point, I miss serving. And just because people think just because you chase bad guys around the world, it wasn't always about putting somebody in jail. I enjoyed the part of helping people, and I was fortunate to be able to do that, and I missed it. So when I was 47, I came in with that big class in the first round of term limits with 62 or 63 members of the House of Representatives. I stayed there for almost 10 years. I served on appropriations for most of that time, and I say most of that time because I got kicked off in my 3rd year as a freshman. Couldn't quite get along with the Republican leadership, and they didn't like some of the things that I did. But ultimately, grandfather, but I'm a businessman, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm born and raised in a business family, and that's pretty much how I approach things. I don't zig and I don't zag, I'm pretty much charging the hill. So I just wanted to give you a little bit about my background and sort of give you just a view of how I think and what motivates me. It's not politics. I'm still not, even going into my 14th year, still not real good at the political side of this job. I'll let you and others in the media and all have fun with all the politics. I'm the fix-it man. I like fixing things. I like solving tough problems. I like communicating. I like bringing people together. I don't care how long it takes. I just believe if people are sincere about fixing things and come to the table until it gets fixed, then we can move things forward. And I have numerous examples of how that's worked since I've been in Baton Rouge, and I'm not going to bore you with them all. But, I used to say when I first got involved in politics that people were losing faith. I do not want to trip on this. I tend to move a little bit, I'm sort of ADD. But, I used to say people were losing faith in this process and in our politicians, and really that's why I got involved. There still are people who want to serve, not be served, but to serve, and that's been very important to me, and that's what I've taught my children. And my wife, who I didn't teach but grew up with as an adult, as a retired educator. My daughter's a lawyer, and my son's a geriatrics nurse. And these 2 kids understand what it is to serve and help people. Not in the limelight, not in the newspaper, just every day helping people. And that's what's drawn me to this service and why I ran for treasurer. But now I say people lost faith in this process. So I'm one of those naive guys that believe we can fix it. We can fix it. My glass is half full. That's just how I approach life, and I wish everybody sort of had that same mentality. But we always hang on the negatives, we always talk about the negatives, and you never hear a lot about the positives. So I'm here today to talk about the positive things that are going on, especially at Treasury. And I always start with unclaimed property because it's my favorite thing that I do. I didn't know much about it before I became treasurer. Even as a legislator in a $30 billion budget, 20-something $million from unclaimed property is not necessarily on the top of your radar. But when I became treasurer and I learned a lot about this program, it really became the place where I could use my entrepreneurial background, my business background to make significant input. And I would call this significant. We went from doing about 30,000 claims a year and about $28 million a year to last year we did almost 200,000. And we did $70 million in claims. Think about that. When's the last time that you've heard government be that successful in anything? And I say that sort of tongue in cheek, but one thing I have learned, we're not very efficient. There's nothing that really drives efficiencies, okay? Unless you sort of have that mindset anyway. You got to treat a penny like a dollar. That is my favorite saying. It was as a legislator and it is still today. We also ran, for the first time, Treasury ran the Main Street Recovery Grant Program. I like to always see a show of hands how many people got a check from that program a year and a half ago. Yeah, let me tell you, and I don't mind telling y'all this. I don't say this a lot. I talked about it with one of my staff members today. I helped craft that sort of behind the scenes as the pandemic money began to come out. And the federal government really has been a little liberal on how that got spent, and Louisiana was one of the first states to create, if not only one of the only states to have a program for small business. There was $275 million, and the leadership asked Treasury to run it. It was the first time Treasury had done anything like that. So we had no roadmap. I told my senior staff, y'all asked me what it was like to be an entrepreneur, you're fixing to find out. They asked us to do something, and I didn't even bat an eye. Yeah, we'll do it. I had no idea how or who we were going to get to do it. We have a very small staff. We only have like 80 people in the whole Department of Treasury, which manages a $40 billion operation. But it's a small staff, and so we had to hire people. We had to bring a couple private contractors in. The good news is we got $275 million out the door in 6 months. It went to 21,000 people across this state. Small business, which makes up about 53% of the jobs in this state. And I see we have cameras and people taping, so I'm not going to use the words I typically use, but small business, and my wife hates when I use the word, so I won't use it because she tells me not to. Let's just say I believe small business really got messed over. Okay? And when I say small business, I mean the places where you go to get your nails done, to get your hair cut, to pick up a burger on the weekend. My wife and I are in the small business circles where we have real rental properties, and a lot of these people are my friends that I do business with every day, and I hear their stories, and they walk in your office and drop their keys on your desk and say, I'm done. Or last weekend I get a call from one of my tenants and want to know if they can live in their unit. Because they're still struggling. So that was a huge program. Credit goes to the legislature for creating it because government forced small business out of business, basically. And when you're right around the bigger cities, you see it. I was in New Orleans. We were shooting unclaimed property commercials. We're sort of revamping it. It's you constantly got to be changed. But anyway, I noted some of the places, and I grew up around New Orleans, that would close, that just never opened back up. It's sad, and I don't get in the debate of the politics and all, but I do understand what it takes to run a small business, and the the lack of control that they had, So that's tough. It's a tough situation. So. The other thing that happened when that program ran, here's something that I don't know if most of you knew. I did not know this. Anybody has any idea what the average fraud rate is on these government programs? Anybody? 100%. I didn't ask if it was needed. I said what the fraud rate is. it's 15 to 17% on average. And y'all smart people, y'all understand that. So there's some lower and some much higher. So when we did this first contract for the program, we had to put in the contract how much fraud we were going to accept. I looked at him like, you seriously? You want me to put in writing that I'm going to accept fraud? Look, man, I'm a former military guy, investigator. You know, put bad guys in jail. I am not going to tell the bad guys that I'm going to acknowledge that we're going to have a certain amount of fraud. But I had to. So I didn't do 15 or 17%, we put 3%. Guess what the fraud rate wound up being 6 months later? I'm very proud of this. The staff did a great job. 1.3%. 1.3%. Don't tell me it can't be done. It's an attitude. It's about going to work every day. It's about leaving your politics at the back door and going to do honest work every day because they will follow. You know, I tell the story, I took over for John Kennedy. I still have the same 5 directors that Kennedy had. And we've made all kinds of changes and improvements. So it's not about necessarily the people all the ways. It is about the policy and utilizing the assets that are out there. And let's face it, somebody asked me yesterday, I was on the radio with Jim this week, and he says, well, why you had such a drastic difference with unclaimed property? I said, technology and the willingness to change. And I tell my staff, I have Kathy Stewart here, who used to be with Bill Cassidy's office, and she loves her new job. Pam Hayes is with me as well. She's my communications director. Kathy is the governmental affairs director. But I lost my thought just to acknowledge y'all. Anyhow, the unclaimed property program was just a great example of being willing to change, and that's what I was saying. You're either moving forward or backwards. There's no staying the same. You know, so it's a good example. I think the Main Street Grant Program was another good example. But you know what I was most proud about the program? Not that we did send the money out, but I like the fact that 1.3 in fraud was about 1.3 or $4 million. We've collected back over $400,000. When's the last time you read that story? And that story still hasn't gotten out there. You know who made the phone calls at nighttime? Treasurer. Went something like this. Hey, Miss Smith, this is Treasurer Schroeder. It's like 8:45. I always did around 8:39. I wanted to make sure that dinner was down and settled. And I didn't want it to come up too quickly. And the conversation would go something like this. I was very cordial, very nice. And I was calling to let you know there's been a mistake made. And that you mistakenly filed some documents that you probably shouldn't have filed that said you did A, B, and C, but you didn't, and it was a mistake. So please send me back my $15,000 before one night you get a knock on your door. So about $400,000 came back to Treasury, your money, back to Treasury, and we turned over about 120 cases to the Inspector General's office. So I got a zero tolerance for that. You know, when I see everyday small business hurting, it bothered me to know that some people were stealing that money and that nobody really even cares. You know, and it's really a shame. Y'all saw the articles this week about the money from the pandemic money that's being stolen. It's unbelievable. You know, I just wish we'd hear more about them doing something to stop them. I would tell you internally, in our office, I get asked a lot, especially in my early days of being treasurer, man, what are you doing about all these contracts that Kennedy talked about? And, you know, many of those contracts are not under Treasury, but I can tell you as a normal practice, just like you would in your own world, and it says it in my comments that Lisa read, we have to get to the point where government runs the same way you run your personal life and your business. That doesn't happen, y'all. Only in government do you get pay raises when you're in a deficit. Right or wrong? Raise your hand if in your company you're in the red and you gave pay raises. Who does that? Oh, government does it. Because government ain't going nowhere. If you haven't figured that out. We're going to die and go to heaven. Government's still going to be there. Okay? So on a regular basis now, we review our contracts. and I'm not going to pick on anybody because I like to do that sometimes, but we review our contracts. And I've just from asking the question, hey, we're running a little tight, do you mind reviewing your contract and let me know if you could help us out this year? And in most cases, and somebody on my staff always tells me, it's the Louisiana companies that say yes, and it's the companies that provide some service that nobody else does that are outside Louisiana that says, no, heck no, we're not doing that. But we run it efficiently. We don't spend it unless we have to, and there's multiple ways of doing that, and we continue to do that annually. I am the chairman of the State Bond Commission, which a lot of people pay attention to, but what I like most about it is influencing habit. If you haven't figured it out, there's not a better time to borrow money right now or refinance money right now. I have helped lead the charge in saving you somewhere around $500 million in interest over the next 20 years. Nobody told me to do it. Nobody asked me to do it. There's no law that says I'm supposed to do it. We just do it because we just did $650 million in gas and fuels bond yesterday, a refinancing, which saves the state $50 million over the next 19 years. Problem is, as I told the banker this morning from Wells Fargo, they'll spend it before we even get it. You know how all that works. But my job is to oversee it. I am frugal, as I said. I treat a penny like a dollar, and if we can save something, we're going to save it. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't spend it. Because it is very much like a business. You have to invest in your business if you want your business to perform. When I first got to unclaimed property, the law allows us to spend 7% of the money that comes in on the operation. They were averaging about 2.3. I've increased that to about 4%. And I really, honestly, would like to spend 7%, but you can't grow it that fast. I want a whole building full of unclaimed property people. You know why? This money does not belong to the state of Louisiana. This belongs to individual owners. It doesn't even belong to the taxpayers of Louisiana. That money belongs to somebody. Our job is to go find that somebody. And thankfully, you agreed, because we passed a unclaimed property trust fund Constitution amendment 2 years ago now that went in effect this year, that no longer can the state spend the unclaimed property money that's left over. And what really brought that to a head is we increased our outcomes so quickly, meaning we were paying out so much money so quickly, we ran out of money 2 years in a row. So when we got to that third year and I couldn't get the administration to move, I couldn't get the legislature to move, I said, fine, we're going to have to do it a different way. I'm just simply not going to give you the money. And if you want it, sue me or sue us. Me is y'all, right? Well, I joke, but this is the truth. Never tell a lawyer to sue you. Because you know what happens? Y'all know what happens. So we push that, thank you, because I think it's important that money will stay in the trust fund now, and the interest will roll into the state general fund, which I think is a win-win. And the problem with government is we're not very patient, and we don't do things for tomorrow. When I say tomorrow, I mean like years down the road. A lot of decisions we make are for the immediate future, like tomorrow, okay? We have to start doing some things that help our future as well. So this unclaimed property trust fund, what it will do is, in 20 years, it will kick off more in interest than what the state was taking at the end of each year, without raising your taxes. Don't you like that? Yeah. So that's a very positive thing. Something that's going on sort of behind the scenes that you're starting to hear more and see more about it. Some of you may have not followed my position on the bond commission when it comes to the Second Amendment. If you haven't figured this out yet, as an Army veteran and a law enforcement veteran, I'm a little touchy when you start talking about my gun, okay? Especially growing up in New Orleans. Well, Baton Rouge, I mean, not that we have any problems here in Baton Rouge with crime, but I'm a little sensitive to that. So about 3.5 years ago, I took my first move to block a bank from doing business with the state on a negotiated contract. Negotiated, not a bid. All these banks can still bid on anything, but on some deals, I can negotiate on my own, and that's probably one of the things I do pretty well. Ask my wife. I'm a pretty good negotiator. So anyway, but as in the recent past, I've said this isn't about just our Second Amendment rights. This is more about corporate America influencing the states through their buying power, bypassing Washington and bypassing the Capitol here in Baton Rouge. I'm opposed to that. I thought that's why I got elected. And if you don't like what I'm doing, you know how to fix that as well. But I don't like the fact that these huge corporations who are run typically not in the South, but in north of the country where the population is huge, influencing what we're doing here in Louisiana and trying to steer Louisiana policy and what you do. I don't agree with that. I just don't. Fundamentally, that's what we have a legislature for, and I've said very simply, if you want to change policy, go file a bill, let the legislature pass that bill, the governor sign it, and I'm following that law. But we're not going to do it, we're not going to go around it. I mean, that's why we have the legislature in place, that's why you have the executive branches, but that's an issue that's getting bigger and bigger, and it's not going away anytime soon. I sit on several organizations as treasurer. One is the State Financial Officers Foundation. I'm on that leadership team. We have one committee in that group. It's the policy committee. Yours truly is the chairman. So these are things that are going on around the country, and I think you're going to start seeing more and more where people are objecting on where we're investing our money and with whom. I think if it's their right to tell Louisiana, we don't want to do business with you, then it should be my right as your treasurer to say, you know what, that's fine. I'm not going to do any business with you. I think we should have that ability to do that. So let's talk real quick. Okay, real quick, and I'll ask some questions. I do very quickly. The session's coming up in March, and for those that don't know, we have billions with a B coming to this state in pandemic money. Call it COVID money, whatever. Everybody calls it something different. Billions. If you go back a year and forward a year, it's probably somewhere in the 60 billion range, and coming in a lot of different ways, either directly to higher ed, directly to hospitals, directly to the state, or directly to the municipalities. 60 billion. Wrap your hands around that, or heads around that. Katrina, when I first got in the legislature under Bobby Jindal's first year, we had $1 billion surplus. That was the Katrina money. Then I can remember when going through that session, you know, people talking, this will never happen in Louisiana again. Well, guess what? It happened times a bunch. You know, so I think it's paramount that we do things with that money, that we don't get parochial, that we do some things that help Louisiana long term, that help us do some things into the future. I don't know you'll ever get this kind of money again. Of course, that's what they said after Katrina. Here we are at 60 billion. I mean, what else could possibly happen? You know? So, you know, we've made a bad habit of living off of it, though. It is now part of our DNA. You know, I was on a national call with treasurers a year and a half ago, and some treasurers, believe it or not, had never gotten any federal emergency money ever in their state. And I saw it tongue-in-cheek, said, well, just come on down here to my office, we'll show you how it works. You know, I mean, think about it. I mean, we consistently get bailed out from money from the feds for some disaster. But there's a couple things that I wanted to mention to you as we look into the future session. There are some things, I think everybody can agree that we have infrastructure problems, and out-migration problems, and we're losing jobs, and there's a lot of things. But I've sort of breaking it down in 3 things that if we don't fix, that unfortunately my nurse and my lawyer live here in Louisiana, but many our kids and grandkids are going to go someplace else. 3 things have to happen. We have to have a public education system where you can send your kids to get educated. You have to be able to go outside at nighttime without getting jacked up at your car. And we somehow have to get rid of this corruption stigma of Louisiana with our politics. And when I say politics, I'm not, there's only one state treasurer, okay? This goes from the top to the bottom. I'm talking about people who sit on boards, school boards, you name the board. I'm talking from top to bottom. We have to get to the point, just like the fraud with the federal money, we have to have a zero tolerance when it comes to corruption. There's nothing more, I hate to sound a little cheesy for a big dude, but there's nothing worse when I hear somebody talk about corruption, and they look, and you're at a convention somewhere, and they talk about Louisiana, they look at you. That's hurtful, man. There's no worse feeling to have that happen to you. And if you've never been out of state and have that happen to you, it's happened to me several times. I'm sick of it. I am tired of it. It's one of the number 1 reasons why I do what I do. There is a right way to do these things. And it may not be against the law. And I do say this, when I walk behind those doors, you do not have to worry about the decisions I make. You may not like them. You may not like my decision, but it's not going to be in a way that I consider to be off-center or politically corrupt some way that I'm enriching somebody. There is a way to do this correctly and properly. And I put that right at the top of the list, what's plaguing this state, because it's talked about everywhere. So let's talk about very quickly, there's some initiatives that I'm going to push for the session. As I spoke a minute ago, we tend to have these consistent hurricanes and, emergencies, right? And I think most people would agree that FEMA isn't very good, right? Yeah, they are. Go ask the people in Calcasieu Parish how good, I can't speak to that, I'm on a little sinus drip medicine, how efficient FEMA is. I would like to see the legislature put aside some money, somehow, it's from somewhere, to create a fund that would allow us, the Treasury or whoever, to lend money to hard-hit areas very quickly, not 6, 9, 10, 14 months later for FEMA-approved projects. I'm not talking about things that weren't approved and they hoping to get approved. I'm talking about FEMA coming in and say, yep, you can rebuild that school, you can do this, this, and this, and then we'll get you the money in 14 months. Look, on any given day, we have cash flow. On every given day, I look at it. We're sitting on $1 billion in cash, okay? We have to come up with a way where we can fund these emergencies and we get reimbursed for it and create a revolving loan program. It can be done if we have the foresight and just the willingness to do it. Because you have to give up some money from somewhere to do it, right? Well, we got surplus galore, we got pandemic like a buffet you've never seen in your life. Certainly, we ought to be able to do this as long as it's just got to be a priority. Next up is I'd like to see a revolving loan program created for infrastructure. And infrastructure means something different depending on where you live. If you go to North Louisiana, they just worried about having some safe water for dinner tonight or with their dinner. Think about that. I'm serious. And we live here in Baton Rouge, and I live in Covington. We don't worry about having safe water. That is a major, major issue, y'all, across this rural state. Second is internet. How many of y'all worked from home during the pandemic? Well, let's put it this way. How many people didn't work from home? There you go. Well, guess what? You couldn't have worked from home without the internet. How many people could work from home without the internet? Raise your hand. All across rural Louisiana, this is happening today. My wife and I my wife's a builder. We just moved for the 19th time. We moved into a rural subdivision that as soon as I get about a quarter mile from the front of the subdivision, you can ask Kathy and Pam, I'm getting close to home. We got to hang up because if not, the internet's dropping and we're hanging up anyway. Okay? But it's a huge problem. Now, there's monies out there. What I'm really talking about doing, and we actually had this bill filed my first year as treasurer. It passed the House, passed the Senate, and the governor vetoed it. I have a legislator going to bring it back this year because we have a lot of money. I'd like to fund that and use it more towards the smaller municipalities. There's a cap at $50,000 or less you can't get out of the capital outlay. And I sort of said this earlier, and if I didn't, I meant to. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this stuff out. All you have to do is go find some state that's doing it right and just do exactly what they're doing. Georgia's doing this, California's doing it, there's other states doing this. You know, you start it today, 20 years from now, all of a sudden you got $1 billion loan program that's paying for itself because they pay a little interest, and it works. It's worked in other states. We need to do that here in Louisiana. I'm also asking the legislature to create another Main Street Recovery Grant Program, because 21,000 businesses out of 400,000 is not a good coverage. We still have a lot of small businesses in this state that are suffering from the pandemic, and we have the money. We have the money. It's, again, about priorities. Then, two more things. Has anybody heard of Zoom? And I don't know how many other platforms are out there. There's a bunch, but who has not? Who has not done some type of computer meeting? Anybody? Come on, don't embarrass. You don't have to be embarrassed. You can raise your hand if you haven't. Everybody in this room has. Do you know the legislature? You have to. It's a violation of law right now to have a Zoom meeting, unless you're under a state emergency. Can't do it. So, I mean, guys, this is like a no-brainer. Why do we have to be last in everything? Come on, seriously? Does somebody really need to say that this is an efficient way to take care of business? No travel. I'm the chairman of the State Bond Commission. They passed a law that for a 2-year period, we would run a pilot. Now I will say this, 2 years ago when this came up, it wasn't as popular as now. So I'm going to ask the legislature to revisit that. Because right now, as the law sits, only the State Bond Commission can have a quarterly meeting by Zoom. And oh, by the way, neither can your local city councils. They can't do it either. This is not just the legislature. This is the entire state of Louisiana. The only way you can do Zoom meetings and government committees and entities is with the state of emergency declaration. That needs to change. Last thing, which is my favorite, which is going to be the one everybody hates the most, at least in the Capitol. We've now had about $1.9 billion in surplus. That means we've taken too much money from you. For whatever reason, and everybody's going, well, we got it from this, and we got it from, I don't really care. It's your money. We spend a lot of money as a government, y'all. We spend a lot of money as government, and we grow it every year. I think at some point in time, when we have these surpluses year after year, 6 years in a row now, I think it is, at least 5, that we ought to be looking at some kind of rebate program back to the taxpayers of Louisiana, because it's your money. I went a little long because I did.
Time for some questions?
Yeah.
He's got some time for some questions.
I do. My time's your time because you paying my paycheck. Questions? Not one. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
You said that when you took office, you made some changes from the prior administration. What were some of those changes?
Really, just when you budget every year, my budget's only $8 million. Okay, so when we look at how we're spending, we looked at our contracts. You know, this is probably not a good example, but it is what it is. You know, and it's not that I'm opposed to the print media, but we're doing a lot more on the internet. So I didn't want to spend all this money on print when we have all this internet service now, and we have to print our unclaimed property names by law every year annually. Well, but when I read the law, it didn't say I had to pay for it. So do it as a public service. You know, you're charging the taxpayers. You know, so we compromise, but we do more on the internet today than ever before. It's amazing. It's amazing how much we do on the internet. And we've gotten rid of paper. We've streamlined it. And we don't have very many more employees. I've had to invest money, you know, but I guess more than anything is looking at our contracts every year, cutting where we can cut, just as a general practice. Cutting isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's really about being efficient and looking at efficiencies every day. And in my space, in my business, if I could save a quarter, I'm going to save a quarter. And you have to have that mentality. We sort of just throw millions around. It's like, well, it's just $1 million. It's just $1,000. It's just $500. Look, I don't mind. This is the truth. Somebody cut their finger someday. This was like 3 years ago. And I asked, don't we have some Band-Aids in here somewhere? And so they went to get the first aid kit that we're required to have. Well, long story short, they hadn't replaced it in a while, so they're going to replace it. Well, she came back and said, and they know how I am, and said, Treasurer, it's $700 to replace that kit. I said, over my dead body, we're going to Walgreens and we get a pack of Band-Aids. So it's really a state of mind and mentality. You can't say I want to save on this program and not save on that program. So it's really just a state of mind. Yes, sir.
Is there a state that would be the model that you'd like to be like?
Yeah, you know, I'd love to be Tennessee because I love country music. You know, my family lives in Tennessee. My dad was a Chrysler dealer. When Chrysler went almost out of business, he and my mother moved from Nashville a while. So I was at the 101st Airborne, not far from Nashville. I watched Nashville go from what they were 25 years ago to what they are today. Don't tell me it can't happen. I've watched it happen in Tennessee. And I'm more familiar with Tennessee than anybody because I go there a lot. I got a brother and sister still live there. Tennessee's doing a lot of good things.
Have they got no state income tax?
No, exactly. Louisiana's going to get there.